Hello YouTube. This is Balor Mage. Welcome back again. And yesterday over the stream we spent a few hours watching the entire Tavern Talk podcast hosted by Darth Microtransaction and Gazi. It was fantastic. I have to strongly advise that you watch the whole thing if you've got like 2 hours and 20 minutes, I think, spare. Absolutely worth a watch. Definitely some new information in there. But I watched the whole thing. I took some notes. I took some timestamps. There are a few real important things that stand out in here. So if you don't have time to watch a whole podcast, I'm gonna rapid fire through some of the important things that we didn't know beforehand that we do know now. But again, we'll link the entire talk in the description. I think you should 100% watch it if you haven't watched it already. The whole thing was great. Honestly, anything Jonathan's in is great. So more information is better. Plus, if you're anything like me, you're just sitting here going, I don't want to do anything. I don't want to do anything except PoE 2. The only thing that interests me right now is PoE 2. Everything else is just pointless. So you got nothing better to do except watch the whole podcast. But on the off chance that you're too busy, let's run through some notes, things we didn't know beforehand. First up, loot drops in Path of Exile 2. Rarity will affect not just how good the tier of the role is, but also how good the base is. So like in PoE 1 terms, we're talking about our higher tier bases, like the new bases that just got added. Like you'll be more likely to get those if you have rarity, and you will also be more likely to have higher rolls on that gear if you have rarity. So rarity stacking is definitely going to be a thing. There's 10 tiers of gear internally, but I believe only 5 for us that we'll see. So tier or possibly 3 in game for us. I can't remember if it was 5 or 3, but essentially the much better rolled gear will drop unidentified, will say on it tier 2 or tier 3 or whatever, which does not mean that the lower ones can't be well rolled. It just means that the ones that are going to say tier 2 or tier 3 or tier 5 on them are way more likely to be really good. So there should be quite a bit more excitement about gear on the floor, at least when we're in the endgame or mapping, even before we identify it. We should be going, oh, that could be a really good piece. That's going to be well rolled. I'm very interested to see how that works out. And on that note, they did confirm loot filters will be in, but I don't think anyone thought they wouldn't. So it just hadn't been officially confirmed. Now it's been said. Next, another thing we kind of assumed but didn't know. They did confirm that Druid and Huntress will be the next 2 classes and that they will be there relatively quickly. No time, but they're both mostly done. We kind of assumed this would be the case where they said, oh, that we were planning on having 8, but we only got to 6, and we know that we've played some Druid and Huntress in different playtests around the place, so we knew those were the 2 that were almost done. Not a huge shocker there. Next up, this one's real interesting. The starting area of your passive trees will change depending on your class. There will be 3 different starting areas for every single part of the tree. So just to isolate one area, if you start a witch, just the starting passive area will be different than if you start a sorceress. And that will again be different to if you start something that doesn't start there on the tree. So every starting area, they weren't very specific about it, but I think we're talking about just like the first little cluster or like the first little 10 to 12-ish points that are just in the beginning there. Those will be different depending on whether you started at that node and which of the base classes you picked. Basically, the only reason to do this really is just so that no matter what you're building, the lead out to go somewhere should hopefully always, or at least most of the time, have something relevant for you. That's a cool way of doing it. the Path of Building devs are in shambles. That sounds like hell to deal with, but that's not my problem. Alright, next up, they did mention that they find endgame juicing still very, very important. They also think that endgame juicing should result in more pack size and more mobs in the map, and that's like one of the key things to do. There will not be quite as much juicing right now, at least, as there is in PoE 1 right now, but they plan to add more later, so cool. They did confirm 100% Righteous Fire will be in the game. Is not in the game yet because it's linked to a class that we don't have yet. My assumption is Templar, obviously. It's definitely a Templar skill. So whenever we get around to getting Templar, will probably be the same time we get Flails, will be the same time we get Righteous Fire. Alright, next up, they confirmed that they're fully aware that somebody would definitely brick their entire Atlas. This was one of the things I was worried about in a video I made like 2 videos back, where the potential to fail so hard that you could brick every exit or brick your entire Atlas and essentially not be able to run anything. Basically, you will be able to just restart your Atlas somehow. Jonathan wasn't specifically sure how, but there's a mechanic there that stops you from bricking it. We don't need the details. As long as it exists, we're good. Next up, some encounters in the campaign will have guaranteed drops. That means things like skill gems or support gems at specific times where you're guaranteed to get them. The interesting part here is that if you happen to miss the mob or the box or whatever it was that was supposed to guarantee you a skill at that point, if you happen to miss that and you proceed to the next zone, it will still be in the next zone waiting for you to find it again. So even if you screw up and walk past it, it'll just be in the next place and then in the next place and then in the next place, but it will not be scaling. So it's just, if it was going to be a level 7 gem and you didn't get it in the level 7 area and you finally find it in the level 11 area, it'll probably be a level 7 gem still, but you'll still get it. That's very cool. I like that. Next up, the new Atlas. They've done some things with the new Atlas that are a little bit weird, or a little bit better maybe, which is it looks like they're allowing target farming, specifically target farming of like bases, far more common on div card drops, and potentially even translating the bases into being able to target farm a unique. They're able to do this because you're not able to run one map all day, every day, the whole day, because you have to spread yourself through the Atlas. So a particular biome may be just more likely to drop leather belts, and then maybe you focus your area on there trying to self-farm a headhunter or whatever other unique. They also confirmed that racing events such as the Gauntlet or custom leagues, etc., things like that, will all be in Path of Exile 2 as well. This was another thing we assumed. They just won't be there at launch. We kind of assumed that they were all coming. There would be no reason not to, but confirmed is always good. Next up, gem quality is only an end game thing. So we expect to find absolutely no gems with quality during the campaign and absolutely no GCPs during the campaign. This is actually going to make GCPs quite a bit rarer and potentially worth quite a bit more money. Also, the expectation will be that the active gem quality should be things that are far more interesting, not things that are boring, like, you know, oh, put 20% quality on this and it'll get 10% increased damage. It probably won't be stuff like that. It'll be stuff more like the new transfigured gems we have in PoE 1, where they're like more interesting, unique qualities, like Summon Holy Relic gets cooldown reduction instead of percent increased damage and things like that. The Lancing Steel gets extra projectiles. Like we're looking at interesting things for quality rather than just generic increased damage, which does make me like that Gemling Legionnaire just a little bit more. Next up, they touched on mounts. Specifically, there's only one mount in the game right now. It is a rower. It's a rower mount. The real important stuff is it really only benefits arrow skills, specifically anything with an arrow, like you're shooting arrows. And what it does is it makes you not slow down while you're shooting. However, it does not increase your base speed at all. Mounts will not be faster than walking. They will not be mandatory for any class or any build, and they're very open to putting in other mounts later that work with different weapon types and different skills and different things. But at no point do they plan on making it so that mounts run faster than you do while you're walking. It is never going to be the sort of thing where mounts like we're used to, where you're like, oh, gotta have a mount up, run between packs, do this to move faster. No, none of that. We're going to get things to ride, but not mounts in the sense that we're used to, not fulfilling that function. Next up, they did confirm that there was no crafting bench at all going into Path of Exile 2. You may have seen crafting benches around. There were definitely crafting benches and different iterations of crafting benches in different builds of the alpha, but eventually they ended up getting rid of it entirely. It's been scrapped. Maybe it ends up coming back later, maybe it doesn't. Either way, we will not be seeing a crafting bench. They touched a little bit on party play. Basically, whenever you're doing endgame party stuff, you will only be like progressing or like expanding the tree of the atlas on whoever's launching the maps. However, whenever you complete anything that would give you a passive point in whatever capacity, everyone in your party will be getting that passive point. So you will all be progressing, even though you're not exploring that map. If you're not the like leader or the one launching the maps, you'll still be progressing. Same with labs and ascension and stuff like that. There's like a specific reward structure. You're not going to double that or triple that by bringing a friend or two, but you will all ascend together. So party play seems to be pretty good. Also, party play looks significantly better in PoE 2 than it does in PoE 1. They also touched on skills granted by both items and by ascendancies. Both skills granted by items and ascendancies will have supports. You will be able to put supports in them. They will just show up in your skill list. You'll be able to put anything in them you want. This is kind of half assumed by some people, but then somewhat questionable because we couldn't support ascendancy skills in PoE 1. So good thing to know. Ooh. Next up, the blood mages, little orbs that were on the ground. Jonathan forgot to tell us that collecting those orbs can double overcap your health. As in, if you have 1,000 health maximum and you run around collecting a lot of those orbs, your maximum 1,000 health, you can have 2,000 current. You can overcap it by 100%, which is good because that whole class was kind of looking a little bit iffy because you would suddenly have to spend life to cast your spells. And we were like, that's getting a bit dodgy, but now that I know that you can overcap your life by a lot, that's great. My favorite moment of the entire thing, what the monkey do? You'll have to watch the whole thing to get context for that. I'm not giving it. The Jade skill that we saw in the trailer, which allows you to like lock yourself into a statue, basically self-petrifying. In the video we saw, it looked like you just turned it on and was locked in place. It turns out that was just the person who recorded it. You're not actually locked there at all. It's a press and hold thing. So you run around, you build up Jade, you press it, it locks yourself into like a petrified thing with basically a huge shield of I don't take damage until this much damage has been done to me. Huge shield, and you just release it and you can move again. So it can essentially be used to dodge massive hits that you can't get out of the way of. This will work in boss encounters and everything. Even it'll allow you to like not block, but to like absorb incoming damage from like unblockable attacks as well. So actually looks pretty damn good now. Before I was thinking of it more of a button where you press and you're just locked in place for 3 seconds. And I was like, I don't know how much I love that. But now that I know that it's more of a like press and hold and you become immune until you run out of Jade, let go if you want to let go early, sounds way cooler. Then we got some minion stuff, which is cool. The first thing is the demon form we saw in the trailer from whichever ascendancy has that. The demon form one looked like it lost all minions. Jonathan doesn't know why it loses all minions and basically said, I'm pretty sure it's not meant to, and we'll try and get that fixed before it even launches. Changing into a demon should not take away all of our minions. Huge. I will have a minion army and also be a demon woman. That's fine by me. They did touch on Animate Guardian. The understanding I got from this bit is the Animate Guardian itself will not be returning. Yay. But something else will be returning that's like to take its design space. The space of like a buildable support, I guess, but in a different way. So I don't know what that's going to be. Didn't really elaborate, but the Animate Guardian as we know it from PoE 1, not there. I think that's a great idea. They mentioned that the scepters that give you a lot of spirit that are going to be used for most minion builds in existence will most likely in the endgame be coming with at least one type of aura, some sort of aura support in them as well. It was a little unclear as to whether or not using that aura would still take spirit or not. So not sure how that's going to work yet, but there will at least be some auras tied to those scepters. Interesting. They did mention that you can change the amount of minions that you have set up and it will be hot swappable with your weapon swap. What this might let you do is set up a clear minion setup in one weapon and then just tap X to weapon swap or cast a skill if you want to set up the automatic one to change your entire minion army setup into a boss killing setup, which I think is going to be really interesting. It was mentioned that the UI for that is not quite super obvious right now and that they are working on a better UI for it, though it functionally works right now. It will work at launch. It is a little bit confusing to deal with apparently. So obviously I'll do that immediately and figure it out. And if it looks confusing enough that I think it deserves a video on day one, we'll do that as well. But the function exists. You will be able to set up 2 different minion armies and weapon swap between them to change what your army is. It's just that the UI might be a little bit questionable. New UI coming for that relatively soon, but not at launch. Golems were introduced, or were told to us that they definitely still exist, but they're not in right now. I assume anything not in right now is coming from a different class, a class we don't currently have. I would say Guardian, but golems don't feel like a Guardian thing. So I'm not sure who Guardian's like associated with. However, my favorite part, they asked about pure minion ascendancies, and Jonathan, so smart, he did exactly the same line that I did in my most recent video, which is basically if we have a pure minion ascendancy, then all minion power has to be balanced around that. Whereas if we have a little bit of minion support in a bunch of different places, then you don't get super limited. So I'm hoping what this ends up resulting in is there being like eventually 5, 6, 10 different options where there's like a little bit of minion support in different ways in ascendancies, and you get to like pick different things, and we're not just all locked into like you can make a necromancer or you're a troll, like, because that I don't want to be doing that. So big fan. Oh, the topic of hot swapping between keyboard and mouse and a controller was brought up. Essentially, they absolutely want to do it. They're committed. It's done. It's been said, we will get it. It will not be ready at launch. So a little bit sad that it won't be ready at launch, but the fact that they said it's coming, that's fine by me. We have Cyclone coming to the game, not in the game yet. Again, belongs with a class that doesn't exist yet. Also belongs with a weapon type that doesn't exist yet. It's traditionally swords. Swords we're not even going to have in the game. There we go. Spell Totem. Supposed to be there. None of us have seen it. Jonathan seemed like he was under the impression that it was already in there, telling me it was definitely in a previous alpha at some point. So that one must be close, but it looks like it's been pulled out. Honestly, it's still like 10 more days away. Could be put back in before then. So there might be a Spell Totem thing. And the last thing, the thing that also pretty excites me a lot, is that they're planning on, and there will be, a .build file. This will not be in at launch, but there will be a .build file that creators will be able to make and link you, and you'll be able to paste in game to get the plan for your passive tree. So we can build your tree and you can post it into your game and just follow the lines, which absolutely, thank you. Thank you. That's fantastic. I want it. Whew. All right. Those were the super standout moments to me as we watched it. Again, if you have time, I heavily suggest you watch the entire thing. The entire thing was great. All right. That is all I have. I will see everybody next time. Goodbye.